shoot a Bolshevik, upgrade a car, blow the whistle, forage the land, explode a red, down the vodka, blow the whistle, bandage the leg, stab a Bolshevik, stoke the fire, all aboard, blow the whistle. Not your traditional gameplay loop, but it turns out it's quite a good one. Hi, I'm Calvin, and today we're going to take a little look at Last Train Home. Developed by Ashbourne Games, published by THQ Nordic and released in 2023, Last Train Home is a solid single-player game that features equal helpings of real-time tactics and strategy. You'll occasionally see it described as an RTS, but that's a pretty inaccurate label, and if you went into it hoping to find StarCraft but with trains, you would end up very confused. What you actually get is a 50-50 split between a real-time tactical and a force management system, both with enough detail and complexity to provide fun and challenging gameplay. It's also based on a bit of real history. If you hail from Czechia or Slovakia, then it's a story you might well be acquainted with. But for those outside of the region, I think I should explain the background to give the whole thing a bit of context. Now, it would take an hour or two to do the tale any real justice, but for our purposes, I'll just try and cover the absolute basics in under a couple of minutes. Okay, so between 1914 and 1918, you've got what we now call the First World War. This was primarily fought between two powers, the Triple Entente, France, Britain and the Russian Empire, with Japan and the USA, against the Central Powers, the German Empire, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. Within Austria-Hungary, you've got two historical states, Bohemia, also known as Czechia, and Slovakia. Volunteers linked to this region, either by birth or heritage, petitioned Russia to recognise their state as an independent nation. To prove loyalty to the cause, they joined a force within the Russian army which later became known as the Czechslovak Legion. It started as a single unit, but after much recruitment grew to be a pretty capable and respected force, some 60,000 strong. Simple, right? Well, it was for a while until the Russian Revolution of 1917, when the Bolsheviks seized power, negotiated a separate peace treaty with the Central Powers and demobilised their army. This essentially left the Legion, a foreign but sizable and well-armed military force who was still hostile to the Central Powers, inside a country that was now at peace with the Central Powers but at war with itself. At this point, the Czechslovak Legion had a simple goal: to leave Russia and to continue the fight in the hope that in the eventual aftermath of the war, their homeland will be recognised as an independent state and they would truly have a country to call their own. The Legion couldn't take the direct route to the Allied lines, as territory owned by the Central Powers was now in the way, and it's impossible to negotiate safe passage through a country that doesn't have a single unified government. Russia now had two broad factions, the Reds and the Whites, each consisting of multiple sub-factions. These groups all feared the potential power of a professional volunteer army within their own borders, and weren't sure if they wanted to neuter it, destroy it, help it, frustrate it, befriend it or ignore it. Being a democratic lot, the Legion voted to join the French army, giving the Entente a good enough reason to send ships to evacuate them. With this in place, the Legion embarked on an epic journey, stole a load of trains, took control of the Trans-Siberian Railway and fought their way towards the Pacific coast. This wasn't an all-smiles pleasure tour across the countryside, but instead a bloody 6,000-mile military campaign with all of the horrors you'd expect from 20th century industrialised warfare. So, after that brief and probably flawed history lesson, you can hopefully understand why home isn't a brief march westward, but instead a long train journey eastward. And that's our premise. It's your job to guide a small detachment of these merry men through their epic journey. You start off with an armoured train, a bunch of soldiers and a few resources, and it's full steam ahead into the campaign. The game opens up with a simple mission. There isn't any threat to worry about, just a few tasks designed to let you get to grips with the basics and to give you something to do while it dispenses a little bits of story. It's your tutorial, but it doesn't feel the need to label itself as one, nor does it feel the need to make rotating the camera a mission objective. In fact, I think it's fair to say that the whole first chapter of the game is an extended tutorial. This is particularly well done, and it does give you time to understand the mechanics specific to Last Train Home. It's not exhaustive, but it's good enough, and it feels like you're actually playing the game rather than just a prelude to it. The management side of the game has a lot of detail to it. Your soldiers need food, rest, warmth and occasionally medical attention. The engine itself needs plenty of coal, and you'll also need metal, wood and cloth for repairs and upgrades. These are the absolute basics, but you'll also need equipment and ammunition for your squads. And if you want an easier time of it, you'll also want to have a reasonable cache of grenades, mines, medkits, vodka and other consumables. Some of these you'll pick up during missions, but others can be gathered during your journey. There are plenty of points of interest along your route, and as long as you don't mind stopping the train for a while, you can fish at lakes, hunt in forests, chop down trees, or scour abandoned settlements for leftover scraps. There's also the occasional village for trading, good for when you've got too much of one thing but not enough of another. All of the requirements are carefully and intrinsically linked, and many of the resources tend to fall into one of two categories: distance and time. You can power across the landscape at high speed, but this uses a lot of fuel. Or you can proceed at a more efficient speed to save fuel, but the increased time pushes up the food requirements. You can take a completionist approach to missions, fighting more enemies and bringing home a greater bounty of coal, iron and cloth, but this does use a lot more ammunition and increases the risk of arriving back on the train with more heavily wounded soldiers. Natural wound healing is pretty slow in the early parts of the game, and you'll probably have to use a few medkits to speed up the process. At the start of the campaign, your train's pretty basic. You've got an engine, 3 passenger cars and a storage wagon. This gets you on your way and provides room for your soldiers to rest up, but little else. As you progress, you'll get the chance to acquire more cars, but normally only one at a time, and the choice you make does have a great deal of impact on the next chapter or two. Hospital cars give your soldiers somewhere to seek proper medical attention, greatly decreasing the time it takes for them to recover from wounds or illness. With the right upgrade, you can also craft health-related consumables to better support your soldiers both on and off the field of battle. Choosing a hospital car as your first edition is a great choice. It allows for you to be far more ambitious on your missions. You'll be able to achieve more with smaller squads or less experienced squads, and be able to arrive back with far more goodies. Your soldiers might take a lot of hits, but the hospital car will make sure they're healed up and raring to go by the time you get to the next mission. The problem with choosing the hospital car is that the other cars are also equally useful, but in different ways. The workshop car allows you to produce improvements for your troops, cold weather gear, improved weapons, higher ammo capacity, and all sorts of odds and ends that just make them better at their job. It also allows you to manufacture grenades, mines, and other consumables. If you choose this as your first additional car, then your soldiers will be stronger, which is just as well because it will probably be a while until you can pick up a hospital car. The third of the initial options is a mobile kitchen. It sounds far less flashy than a workshop or a hospital, but it's an underappreciated gem. As well as being able to provide nourishing and helpful consumables, it's also able to make better use of your raw food supplies by combining them with scavenged vegetation to stretch out your rations. Food can be a real problem, especially if you're taking it slow, and the presence of a mobile kitchen can often be the difference between a well-fed unit in high spirits and a depressed outfit wasting away on half rations. Hungry, emaciated soldiers without the will to go on do not make effective fighting machines. What's nice about all of these options is there's no wrong choice. All of the different cars are great, and as the campaign goes on, you will get the opportunity to pick up the others later down the line. In the final chapters, you'll have all 3, but the order you decide to get them in and how soon you get them really does dictate the challenges ahead. On my first playthrough, I chose the hospital car. Wounds picked up in battle or through accidents never slowed me down, nor did illness. I always had fit and able squads ready to go at a moment's notice, although I did have to trade a lot of the resources that I'd rather use for upgrades just to make sure I had enough to eat. On my second playthrough, I went for the kitchen. My cooks were always hard at work, making hearty meals for my slightly sickly and bruised soldiers. The initial missions were a bit tougher, as some of my best fighters were often laid up in bed, but they never went hungry, and because I didn't have to buy much in the way of food, I could use my resources to make my train stronger. Both situations were equally challenging, but in different ways, and that kept things interesting. The nuts and bolts of the management system is all handled by the train view. It's quite aesthetically pleasing, and instead of spreadsheets, you get a nice little interface that's represented within the game engine itself. You zoom into each car and you can see them in action, something that goes a long way to connect the logistics of the whole operation to the people that rely on it. It's detailed enough to make interactions worthwhile, while not being so complex that it's off-putting or annoying. To get things done, like driving the train, stoking the engine, healing the sick, or making some ammo, you need to assign soldiers to these special slots. There are 2 shifts, night and day, so each position requires a team of 2. The longer a soldier spends in that job, the better they will be at it, something that generally makes them faster, more efficient, or both. If you would prefer a certain soldier spends their time shooting Bolsheviks instead of stirring soup, then you can instead assign them to a squad. These squads can then be dispatched from the train and sent to trade, forage for supplies, or more importantly, complete missions. These missions assume the format of a real-time tactics game. If you're unsure of the difference between that and an RTS, think of it like this. If the missions involve gathering resources, building structures and producing units, it's probably an RTS. If you don't have any of that, and instead find yourself controlling a handful of soldiers and have access to some sort of stealth mechanic, it's probably a real-time tactical, or RTT. Think Commandos rather than Command and Conquer. This part of the game is really well done, and all of the work put into the grander management side of the game has not in any way compromised the quality or depth of the tactical gameplay. You can bring up to 10 soldiers into a mission. Sometimes this is a bit overkill, but the mission does give you an indication of the difficulty and recommended force size before you start. The soldiers themselves are split into 5 different roles: riflemen, scouts, machine gunners, grenadiers and medics. These are all pretty self-explanatory types, so I don't think they need too much explanation, but it's worth mentioning that they all have their uses, and the best squad is often one that includes 1 or 2 of each. Their specific roles are defined by 2 things: the weapons they use and the abilities they can learn. Scouts have marksman rifles, so they're slow firing but accurate and do high damage. They can also use binoculars to reveal what's ahead, and they have other useful tools like camouflage and the classic throw a rock distraction move. Along with the riflemen, who are fast on their feet and have bayonets for extra melee damage, they form the core of the stealthy approach. The scouts show you where the enemy are and encourage them to divert from their patrol paths, and the riflemen sneak out of cover and stab them up good. The machine gunner and the grenadier come into their own when the sneaky approach is no longer an option. The grenadier's mines and grenades are great for dispatching light vehicles, and their smoke bombs enable you to close with tough defences like the machine gun emplacements. Once properly deployed and sighted, your own machine gunner allows you to quickly cut down bunches of enemies who are out in the open. They've got a narrow cone of fire, so they still require some support from your other soldiers, but they put in a lot of work when the alarm bell rings. Finally, you've got the medic. They patch up battle damage by temporarily replacing lost hit points. A wounded soldier will still need a lot of medical attention after the battle, but with the intervention of a medic, they will live to fight another day. They do have other supporting skills too, but their primary job is as necessary as it is obvious. It's a well thought out selection of mutually supporting types. There isn't any one role that's straight up better than the others, which is nice as it means that the developers didn't feel the need to place any artificial limits on them. The squads I deploy always have at least 1 of each, although I will normally lean on the scout a bit harder than the others, so my larger squads will often feature 3 or 4 scouts. Vision is important, and the one-shot kill ability they get at higher levels is particularly effective when you have enough scouts to eliminate a small patrol in a single volley. The tactical gameplay is really solid. The maps are big, detailed and thematic, and the mission design itself is on point. They generally have a primary objective that's split into several chunks, and also some optional secondary objectives that reward you with additional XP and or supplies. On top of these, there are softer objectives, not specifically defined, but extra things you might want to do if you've got the health and ammo to devote to it. Small enemy encampments off the beaten path you can clear for resource pickups and stuff like that. There's a lot of variety in the objectives, both within the missions themselves and between them. Some are more stealth focused, while others are built around direct action. Some are offensive and some are defensive, and most feature all of these elements but weighted differently. There's often multiple ways to complete a mission, and the method you choose is going to come down to the soldiers that you decide to bring with you. If you've got lots of scouts and fast-moving riflemen, you might want to sneak through the back way and take the enemy positions from behind. If you've got lots of grenadiers and machine gunners, then you can just deploy a smoke screen, move forward, throw a bunch of grenades and go straight in the front door. If you want to take your time, then you can do a bit of both, using half of your squad to make a lot of noise in one direction, while the other half does some covert murder from the other flank. One thing I really appreciated about this game engine is that the stealth side isn't some boolean on or off mode, where everyone is instantly alerted once the first shot is fired. It's 1917, there's no walkie-talkies, and being in the midst of a civil war means that a single gunshot in the distance isn't quite the call to action that it might be in other situations. This doesn't mean that your opponents are completely blind to the outside world. Gunshots do attract the attention of those nearby, and some enemies will run off to an alarm bell and start ringing it furiously for help. causing all of the enemies in the immediate area to run in and join the fight. There are even telegraph stations, which a startled enemy might run to, quickly tap out an SOS message in Morse code to summon a truck full of soldiers. Startled enemies do have a habit of running for these alarm stations, which can be particularly useful if you've managed to sneak a machine gunner close enough to set one up within its arc of fire. I really like these missions a lot. If you take your time and use a bit of brain power, they aren't too challenging, but they're challenging enough to be engaging and fun. The variety does keep them interesting, and the occasional inclusion of heavy machine gun, anti-tank and artillery positions gives you more to think about. There are vehicles too, not many, but the odd tank or armoured car can certainly make conventional approaches impossible, forcing you to scout out the area to look for things that you can take advantage of. This might be something as simple as a defensible position you can lure the enemy into, or something more specific such as a capturable gun position or vehicle. All throughout the missions and the campaign mode there are lots of other considerations. All of your soldiers are individuals. They're not randomly generated but instead predefined, complete with portrait photos, biographies and their own particular set of skills and traits. Some of these skills have got more direct uses. For example, the burglar skill makes that soldier better at locating things. In the campaign mode, they will often find hidden stashes of valuables when searching abandoned villages. And in missions, sometimes they will spot an extra resource cache that would otherwise be unavailable to you. Other traits might make the soldier particularly well suited to one task or particularly bad at another. Many of these traits are quite subtle. Some of your soldiers are more trusting, friendly or understanding than others, and some are vengeful or suspicious, that sort of thing. These traits continually affect many of the dialogue or other scripted events that happen during gameplay. The effects are normally minor, so having the wrong person do the wrong job isn't going to completely ruin the outcome, but the constant modification of the situation due to certain traits does give your unit a little more personality than you'd normally find in these sorts of games. It helps to solidify the names and portraits in your mind and allows you to build a little bit of attachment to your soldiers. You tend to remember these people and you put them in positions that best suit them, and when one of your assignments yields a small benefit, such as a morale boost from your optimist raising everyone's spirits after an unsuccessful hunt, it feels rewarding. It's also an exceptionally well-paced game, and even though each chapter consists of the same sort of core elements, driving your train through a vast countryside and stopping off for missions and other exploration along the way, it doesn't really feel repetitive. Each chapter introduces additional mechanics, something new for you to think about and to work with and around. The first couple are pretty simple, until the Reds start to pay you more attention and put more effort into stopping you. A threat meter is introduced. The longer you stay in one place, the higher it rises, and at certain points a biplane might fly over and strafe you, causing damage and casualties. This makes you think hard about the POIs and what you want to investigate and how long you want to spend in any one location. Later on, you've got to worry about the cold and to start providing heaters and warm clothing for all of your soldiers so they don't succumb to illness. And it's not all bad stuff. Later on, you do get to pick up an armoured artillery car, which comes with some machine guns you can use to shoot down those pesky biplanes. If you find or manufacture some shells, you can even use the big guns to call in artillery support within the missions. All of these additional challenges and extras fit the theme perfectly, and they don't feel like they've been shoehorned in for the sole purpose of gameplay. If you only know one thing about Siberia, it's the temperature, and surviving in that sort of environment was one of the real key challenges of the story this is all based upon. And that's another interesting thing about Last Train Home, it is very narratively driven. Sure, it's primarily a tactical and management game, but it does attempt to tell a story, and it's a good one. The Czechslovak Legion's journey is an epic tale if ever I heard one, and it's pretty much the foundational story of the birth of a nation. As well as in-game dialogue, there are gorgeous CGI cutscenes, full-motion video, photographs and sketches. It's not campy, over-the-top or bombastic, it's serious, matter-of-fact and reverential. All of these elements are exceptionally well done. They do not cheapen the experience, but instead they elevate it. The story isn't used as a simple framework just to hang missions on, but instead a core element that continually links the things you do to why you're doing them. It does not surprise me one bit that this game comes from a Czech developer, and it's obvious that Ashbourne Games wanted to tell an important story through the medium of a great game. And in this they succeeded. The storytelling is superb, as is the game itself. Some of these story-heavy games can feel a bit on the short side, but Last Train Home does not fall into this trap. This isn't a campaign you finish in 2 or 3 evenings. The 9 different chapters and dozens of missions make it feel like a real journey, and it took me some 30 or 40 hours to complete my first playthrough. On top of that, a couple of the chapters actually have a choice of routes. Combine this with the other options available and there's easily scope for a second playthrough almost immediately after you finish the first. Now, before we wrap up, I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about war and trains. Railways have been a key component in warfare for over 150 years, so you would think that their inclusion in such games would be a common occurrence. A large part of war in the industrial age is moving a lot of big heavy things from one place to another, and trains are particularly good at that. But despite this, the trains in most of the strategy games we play are nothing more than a footnote, a bit of background scenery, a static objective you must park your other vehicles next to. Instead, a truck or a helicopter arrives on the scene, a little box pops out and hey presto, you've suddenly got enough material to build half a dozen battle tanks. Of course this is fine, it's just an abstraction after all, but I do think it's nice to see a game where such a critical part of the logistics of war takes centre stage. Last Train Home is one of the better strategy and tactics games of the last couple of years. It's honestly a real joy, and if you're a fan of these games, I highly recommend it. It doesn't feel the need to be a new version of something that already exists, it instead does its own thing and it does that thing very well. The story is engaging and the gameplay is a lot of fun. It's challenging enough to be rewarding, but not so complex or unforgiving that it becomes frustrating, and it's not so punishing that you can't relax into the story and enjoy yourself. In a market oversaturated with sequels, prequels, remasters, reimaginings and spiritual successors, Last Train Home is a refreshing dash of originality. More importantly, it's skillfully executed, fun to play, and does a pretty good job at bringing a great story to a wider audience. Hi there! If you like the look of Last Train Home, I recommend popping it on your wish list as it frequently goes on sale for something in the region of $15, which is an absolute steal. Also, if you like a bit of history and want to learn more about the Czechslovak Legion, there's a great video by enthusiastic storyteller Lindy Beige that I'll link in the description. Other than that, leave me a like if you enjoyed this video, and if you've played the game yourself, let me know how you got on in a comment or on the Discord. And as usual, if you want more of this sort of thing, then subscribe to my channel and I hope to see you back soon.